Well, I'm joined now by our reporter Michael Fisher, who is at the Tyrone County Hospital where the injured are being treated. Michael, do you have any further details on the number of casualties?
Well, I can tell you now that just in the last 10 minutes, the hospital staff said that 108 casualties have been taken here to the hospital, and dozens of people have been arriving here in shock as well, inquiring about their relatives. Now, 5 people died here in hospital, and some 44 were transferred to other hospitals in other parts of the north. 6 were taken by helicopter to Belfast and Derry. Those would be those who had more serious eye and hand injuries. But overall, the scene, just seeing the people coming out of the main entrance here, that people are just absolutely dazed, and obviously there's most notable the sense of shock even among the chaplains from the various religions who've been offering comfort to some of the victims. They've been clearly shocked by the sights inside the wards, and the hospital staff have been describing some of the extent of the injuries involved. They've had to amputate limbs in some cases. The victims include many women and children, some of them indeed relatives of staff at the hospital, who immediately launched an emergency plan, and doctors and nurses came in from other parts of the north to help out. It's certainly the largest such atrocity that there has been, largest single incident that there has been in the north throughout the whole period of the Troubles. Among the injured, it appears there were 4 Spanish teenagers who are here in Ireland to learn English, and one of the youngest victims, I understand, is possibly 8 months old. And among the visitors here has also been the RU Chief Constable Ronnie Flanagan, who you heard earlier, and he described the bomb as a murderous attack.
Did he have any other remarks in addition to that initial one?
Well, as he was saying, he spoke of the warning, which was about 35 minutes in all, being totally inadequate. He said the victims had no chance because the bomb actually went off some 400 yards away from the courthouse mentioned in the warning, and that building is certainly a landmark in Omagh town, he said, and he personally couldn't come to any other conclusion but that the information given by the bombers was just deliberately misleading.
Michael, thanks very much for that. Today's bomb attack has been condemned by politicians on both sides of the border, as well as in Britain and the United States. The Taoiseach said the government would use whatever resources it had to crush those responsible. The British Prime Minister, Tony Blair, said the perpetrators could not be allowed to destroy the peace process.
Extending her sympathy to the victims and their families, President McAleese said the hopes of many had been obliterated in one cruel afternoon of purposeless terrorism. Her statement said everything must be done to bring the perpetrators to justice, a view also expressed by the Taoiseach.
This is a tragic day and a very serious bombing offence in terms of anything that's happened over recent years. And the fact that for whatever reason the bomb went off in an area where people thought they were safe in makes it even more devastating. And from our point of view, we'll continue to work in dealing with this particular group with the RUC and the Gardaí. They have been monitoring them as closely as they possibly can, and we'll use whatever resources we have to crush these people.
The Fine Gael leader John Bruton said the people behind the attack were addicted to violence and had no place in a civilised society. The British Prime Minister spoke of the senseless loss of life.
Our other emotion has got to be not simply one of outrage at the evil of it and total determination to bring the perpetrators of it to justice, but an equal determination that these people will not win.
Northern Ireland's First Minister, the Ulster Unionist leader David Trimble, said the attack would be remembered for its savagery and naked hatred carried out by violent Republicans who had plunged to a new depth of despair. His deputy, the SDLP's Seamus Mallon, said those responsible had nothing to offer but death, destruction and suffering. Sinn Féin's Martin McGuinness said he was appalled and disgusted by the attack, which he said was designed to wreck the peace process. He called on whatever group was responsible to stop immediately. In the United States, the White House condemned the attack, but said it wouldn't change President Clinton's planned visit to Ireland in early September. Cathy Milner, RTE News.
Garda and RUC surveillance of suspected members of the self-styled Real IRA is to be stepped up in the wake of the Omagh bombing. Gardaí, who have had a number of successes against the organisation, are also to increase security at the border and at the ports.
As Sinn Féin edged towards the Good Friday peace agreement and the provisional IRA maintained its ceasefire, members of the IRA who disagreed with the Sinn Féin strategy were gathering around a former Provo Quartermaster General and edging towards the formation of a breakaway organisation. It soon emerged that the dissidents had recruited some key people from the provisionals, not only in Louth, where the former Quartermaster General is based, but from areas on both sides of the border, including South Armagh, Limerick, Cork and Dublin. And exceptionally good Garda intelligence, which resulted in the interception of half a dozen or more car bombs on their way to the north, showed that while the dissidents number only about 100 or so, they had the expertise to make their own very sophisticated bombs. It also emerged that they were planning to bomb not only targets in the north, but in Britain. Again, good Garda intelligence resulted in the interception of large bombs at Dunleary on the eve of the Intrigue Grand National and earlier at Howth in County Dublin. Thanks to a tip-off from the Gardaí, police were also able to foil a plan to firebomb London. Inevitably, however, some bombs reached their targets in the north, planted either by dissidents in the Republic or in the north, and it was learned that the so-called new IRA was also attempting to forge links with two other dissident groups, the INLA and the self-styled Continuity IRA. But while several towns in the north suffered severe damage, there were no fatalities until today. While the Gardaí were congratulated on their successes, it was realised that one day one of the dissidents' bombs might cause casualties. And only recently it was reported that the government was considering how it could clamp down even harder on the dissidents, with new legislation if that was considered necessary. In the wake of the Omagh bombing, I'm told Gardaí will now be putting the dissidents under even more intense surveillance. Security will also be stepped up at the border and at the ports, in case the dissidents may now try once again to extend their bombing campaign to Britain. Tom O'Cochrane, RTE News, Dublin.
A short while ago, the Taoiseach came into studio to give his response to the bombing.
I've been horrified at what's happened today in Omagh. It was a massive bomb. The whole warning system led people into the full blast of the bomb. We know there's 21 people dead, including a very young baby, and many more very seriously injured and dozens injured. It is, of course, an attempt to ruin the peace process, an attempt by those people who are breakaway militant group who've been trying to have bombs in both the United Kingdom and in the north and in the border region. The Gardaí have been successful in thwarting them many times this year, but unfortunately this time they got through. But I think our heart tonight, in the first instance, has to go out to all of those relatives of people who've died and those who've been injured. It is a ghastly act and a cruel act.
Where does this leave the Irish government in relation to the peace process and in particular the release of prisoners? Isn't there an urgency now for you to maybe stall that process in the light of the events of today? Well,
the agreement is quite clear. Any organisation that is involved in military actions of any kind or paramilitary actions cannot be released, and they have not been released. We have bypassed many prisoners because if their organisation they're associated with, they will not be released, and that has continued to be the way. There's no evidence of anyone who's been released joining up. If there was, of course, then they would not, they would be rearrested or blocked. But what we're seeing here is what we knew all last winter, that there were a fairly sizable, but not that sizable group who were determined to make sure there was no agreement in the first place. After Good Friday they continued to involve themselves. Because of the huge intelligence operation that we have put in, we've been able to thwart them several times.
The question of decommissioning of paramilitary weapons, surely today's events highlight the need for action to get all guns and ammunition out of the north.
Of course, that continues to be one of the priorities and one of the issues of the agreement. But it does show that if there are people outside the agreement, outside of the mainstream groups and the paramilitary groups in particular, that they can continue these acts. I think what we have to do is now face up to the fact that we must ruthlessly suppress these people who are involved in these deeds, and we, in top of what we're doing, we will review that and see what more we can do to try and make sure that these people are taken out of circulation.
How have today's events destabilise the peace process?
Of course it's been a terrible day for it, but it's an attack on democracy, and as Democrats we must pick ourselves up and continue to fight for what is right. The people voted for democracy. They voted for a peace agreement. They do not want to see people being allowed to do this, and then we owe it to the people to stop them.